I was 22 when I first killed another human being, and I thought I was saving the world. My name is Marcus Chen, and for 3 years, I was humanity's golden boy, the poster child for Earth's planetary defense force. They put my face on recruitment posters, filmed documentaries about my missions, and told children bedtime stories about the brave pilot who kept the monsters away. What they never told anyone, what I never told anyone until now, is that the real monster was me. It started during the Kepler colony crisis. I was a rookie pilot then, fresh out of the academy with reflexes like lightning and a head full of righteous fury. The separatists had taken control of 3 outer rim colonies, declaring independence from Earth's government. Official reports called them terrorists, radicals who threatened the unity of human civilization. I believed every word. When they scrambled my squadron to retake the colonies, I climbed into my fighter's cockpit like I was mounting a noble steed, ready to defend democracy and freedom. The first engagement was over Kepler 7, a mining world with 2 million colonists. Intelligence briefings told us the separatists had fortified positions around the main cities, using civilian structures as shields. Our orders were surgical strikes, minimal collateral damage, neutralize military targets only. I locked onto what my targeting computer identified as an enemy weapons depot, a cluster of buildings on the outskirts of New Shanghai. The missile flew true, the explosion bloomed like a deadly flower, and I felt the rush of victory surge through my veins. It wasn't until 3 days later that I learned the truth. The weapons depot was a school. 300 children, ages 6 to 16, had been attending morning classes when my missile turned their building into rubble and flame. The separatists had been storing ammunition in the basement, yes, but the children had no idea. They were just kids learning about mathematics and literature and dreams they would never live to pursue. Command covered it up, of course. The official report listed the target as a legitimate military installation. The families were told their children died in a separatist bombing, that the rebels had used them as human shields. I received a commendation for accuracy under fire and a promotion to lieutenant. But at night, when the ceremonies ended and the cameras stopped rolling, I would stare at the ceiling of my quarters and see 300 small faces looking back at me with questions I couldn't answer. The war escalated quickly after Kepler 7. What had started as police action against unruly colonists transformed into full-scale rebellion spanning 12 systems. The separatists, calling themselves the Colonial Liberation Front, began striking Earth supply convoys and military installations. Their leader, a former Earth admiral named Victoria Reese, broadcast messages across the Outer Rim calling for complete independence from what she termed the tyranny of central authority. My squadron was reassigned to Task Force Hammer, an elite unit tasked with hunting down separatist leadership. We were the best of the best, pilots with kill counts that read like statistics from ancient wars. My wingman, Sarah Martinez, had 37 confirmed kills. Our squadron leader, Commander Jake Harrison, had 52. I was catching up fast, my score climbing with each mission. The media loved us, called us heroes, painted our fighters with victory marks like ancient knights decorating their shields. The mission that changed everything came 6 months into the campaign. Intelligence had located Admiral Reese's command ship, a converted heavy cruiser called the Defiance, hiding in the asteroid belt of the Vega system. Task Force Hammer was ordered to destroy it, no survivors, end the rebellion by cutting off its head. We jumped into the system at 0400 hours, 12 fighters against 1 enemy ship. The odds seemed laughably unfair, but the Defiance was heavily armed and commanded by someone who had once been our teacher at the Naval Academy. The battle was brutal. Admiral Reese maneuvered her ship through the asteroids like a dancer, using the rocky debris as cover while her gunners tried to pick us off one by one. We lost 3 fighters in the first 10 minutes, good pilots whose names I still remember, men and women who had families waiting for them back on Earth. But we were relentless, coordinated, professional. We herded the Defiance into open space where our superior numbers could tell, where her single ship couldn't match our combined firepower. I was the one who delivered the killing blow. My plasma torpedoes punched through the Defiance's weakened shields and tore into her reactor core. The explosion lit up the asteroid belt like a miniature sun, and for a moment, I felt the familiar surge of victory, the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. But then my communications array picked up something that made my blood turn to ice water. Emergency signals from the Defiance, automated distress calls that listed not just military personnel aboard, but civilians. Families. Children. The truth came out during the debriefing. Admiral Reese hadn't just been commanding a warship, she had been evacuating colonist families from worlds threatened by Earth's advancing forces. The Defiance had been carrying over 2,000 refugees, men, women, and children fleeing the violence that was tearing their homes apart. They weren't soldiers or terrorists or combatants. They were people looking for safety, and I had killed them all with a single, perfectly aimed shot. Command classified the details immediately. The official story was that we had destroyed a separatist command vessel carrying military personnel and strategic supplies. The refugee transport angle was buried so deep that even most of Task Force Hammer never learned about it. But I knew. I carried the weight of 2,000 lives cut short by my decision to pull the trigger. 2,000 people who had trusted Admiral Reese to lead them to safety, only to die in the cold vacuum of space because I was very good at my job. The nightmares started that week. Not the usual combat stress dreams that every pilot experienced, but something darker, more personal. I would dream about floating through the wreckage of the Defiance, seeing faces pressed against broken viewports, families holding each other as the life support failed and the cold crept in. Children who looked exactly like the ones I had killed on Kepler 7, staring at me with eyes full of accusation and incomprehension. Sarah noticed the change first. We were in the pilot's lounge after another successful mission, another separatist installation reduced to scrap metal and vapor, and she caught me staring into my drink like it contained answers to questions I was afraid to ask. "You're different lately," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Quieter. More focused, if that's even possible for you." I wanted to tell her about the refugees, about the children, about the growing certainty that we weren't the heroes the propaganda made us out to be. But the words stuck in my throat like broken glass. How do you explain to someone that your greatest victory was your greatest failure? How do you tell your wingman that the enemy might be right about us? Instead, I deflected. Just thinking about the next mission. Intelligence says the separatists are planning something big. Sarah nodded, accepting the lie because it was easier than digging deeper. Well, whatever they're planning, we'll stop them. We always do. The next mission came 3 weeks later. The separatists had seized control of Arcturus Station, a massive orbital facility that served as a trade hub for the Outer Rim systems. Losing it would cut Earth supply lines to a dozen colony worlds and potentially turn the tide of the war. Task Force Hammer was assigned to retake the station, along with 2 full Marine battalions and a squadron of heavy bombers. The briefing was clinical, professional, delivered by officers who spoke about acceptable losses and strategic objectives with the same tone they might use to discuss the weather. Arcturus Station held approximately 50,000 people, a mix of civilian workers, merchant crews, and recently, separatist forces. Our orders were to neutralize all resistance and secure the facility for Earth control. Rules of engagement were flexible, meaning we had permission to use whatever force necessary to complete the mission. I raised my hand during the briefing, something I had never done before. The room fell silent, dozens of eyes turning toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to annoyance. "Sir," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears, "what about civilian evacuation? 50,000 people, that's a lot of non-combatants who might get caught in the crossfire." The briefing officer, a colonel whose name I never learned, looked at me like I had asked about the mating habits of extinct Earth animals. "Lieutenant Chen, civilian safety is a secondary concern. Our primary objective is securing the station. If the separatists wanted to protect civilians, they shouldn't have involved them in military operations." The logic was flawless, cold, and completely inhuman. I sat back down and said nothing more, but my mind was racing. 50,000 people, most of whom had probably never held a weapon or fired a shot in anger, were about to become acceptable losses in Earth's war for control. And I was going to help make it happen. The assault on Arcturus station began at dawn, ship time. Our fighters swept in first, targeting the station's defensive turrets and docking bays while the bombers followed behind, their payloads aimed at what intelligence identified as separatist strongholds. From my cockpit, the station looked like a small city spinning slowly against the stars, its lights twinkling like earthbound neighborhood seen from orbit. Beautiful and peaceful and about to become a battlefield. The separatists fought back harder than expected. Their fighters, outdated but well piloted, swarmed out of the station's hangar bays like angry hornets defending their nest. The space around Arcturus became a maze of laser fire and missile trails, ships dancing deadly patterns while their pilots tried to kill each other with split-second timing and millimeter precision. I shot down 4 enemy fighters in the first hour, each kill clean and professional and utterly necessary for mission success. But then I saw something that made my trigger finger freeze on the controls. One of the separatist fighters, damaged and venting atmosphere, was trying to dock with a civilian transport that had launched from the station's outer ring. The transport was clearly marked with medical symbols, probably carrying wounded or evacuating non-combatants from the battle zone. The fighter pilot, wounded himself from the way his ship was moving, was attempting to transfer to the transport, seeking medical attention or simply trying to survive. According to our rules of engagement, both ships were legitimate targets. The fighter was enemy military, and the transport was aiding enemy personnel. A textbook engagement, the kind they used in training simulations to test pilot judgment and tactical thinking. I lined up my shot, locked onto the transport's engines, and prepared to fire. Then I saw the children. Through the transport's viewports, illuminated by the emergency lighting, I could see faces pressed against the glass. Small faces, young faces, children who couldn't have been older than 10 or 12. They were looking out at the battle raging around them with expressions of terror and wonder, watching their world tear itself apart in fire and vacuum. One little girl, her hair tied in ribbons that reminded me of my own sister, waved at my fighter as I passed, apparently thinking I was there to help her. I couldn't pull the trigger. For the first time in my military career, I had a clear shot at a legitimate target and I couldn't bring myself to fire. The transport and the damaged fighter docked successfully, the wounded pilot was transferred aboard, and they jumped to hyperspace before any other Earth forces could intercept them. I filed a report claiming targeting system malfunction, another lie to add to the growing collection. The battle for Arcturus station lasted 18 hours. When it was over, Earth forces controlled the facility, but the cost had been enormous. 15,000 civilians had died in the crossfire, their bodies floating in the station's corridors or trapped in compartments that had lost life support. The separatist forces had fought to the last man, making Earth troops pay for every corridor, every room, every inch of deck plating. I walked through the conquered station afterward, part of the inspection team cataloging damage and assessing repairs needed to make the facility operational again. What I saw there changed me forever. Families huddled in emergency shelters, their faces hollow with grief and shock. Children orphaned by the battle, too young to understand why their parents weren't coming home. Elderly civilians who had worked on the station for decades, watching their life's work reduced to scorched metal and broken dreams. In one section, I found a classroom where a teacher had been conducting lessons when the fighting started. The children's drawings were still on the walls, bright pictures of spaceships and planets and futures that would never come to pass. The teacher's body was slumped over her desk, apparently killed by debris when a stray missile punched through the outer hull. Blood had pooled on lesson plans that would never be taught, knowledge that would never be shared. That night, in my quarters aboard the task force flagship, I made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I accessed the classified files about our recent missions, all the details that had been hidden from public view and most of the military. The refugee transport I had destroyed. The school on Kepler 7. The civilian casualties from dozens of operations that had been classified as clean, surgical strikes against military targets. The pattern was undeniable. Earth's forces weren't just fighting separatist military units, we were systematically destroying the infrastructure and population centers that supported colonial independence. Every mission, every target, every acceptable loss was part of a larger strategy to make rebellion so costly that no colony would ever dare challenge Earth's authority again. We weren't heroes defending freedom and democracy. We were instruments of terror, designed to break the will of anyone who opposed central control. I started making copies of the classified files, storing them on secure drives that I hid in my personal equipment. I told myself I was just preserving the truth, documenting what really happened so that someday, when the war was over, people could understand the real cost of victory. But deep down, I knew I was planning something more dangerous, something that would mark me as a traitor to everything I had sworn to defend. The breaking point came during our next major operation, the assault on New Geneva Colony. Intelligence reported that the separatists were using the planet as a base for building new warships, constructing a fleet that could challenge Earth's naval supremacy. Our orders were to destroy the shipyards and eliminate the separatist fleet before it could become operational. Standard procedure, surgical strikes, minimal collateral damage. But when we arrived in the New Geneva system, what we found wasn't a military shipyard. It was a refugee camp. Hundreds of thousands of colonists from worlds that had been liberated by Earth forces, living in temporary shelters while they tried to rebuild their lives. The separatists had been building ships, yes, but they were transport vessels, evacuation ships designed to carry civilians to safety beyond Earth's reach. The order came down from Fleet Command within minutes of our arrival. Destroy everything. No survivors. The refugee camp was classified as a separatist military installation, and everyone in it was considered an enemy combatant. Task Force Hammer was to lead the attack, our fighters clearing the way for orbital bombardment that would turn the planet's surface into molten glass. I sat in my cockpit, weapons armed and ready, staring down at a world full of families who had already lost everything once. Children who had watched their homes burn, parents who had buried their own children, elderly people who had lived through wars and famines and disasters, only to find themselves facing annihilation from the very government they had once called their own. All units, this is Hammer Lead, Commander Harrison's voice crackled through the communication system. Begin attack run. Target civilian infrastructure first, then move to military installations. Make sure nothing survives. I looked at my targeting display, at the refugee camp spread across New Geneva's continents like scattered seeds. 500,000 people, maybe more, all of them guilty of nothing more than wanting to live free from Earth's control. All of them about to die because I was very good at following orders. Hammer 7, you're clear to engage, Sarah's voice came through my headset. She was flying wing position beside me, her fighters' weapons already locked onto a cluster of shelters housing 10,000 refugees. I made my choice. Instead of firing on the refugee camps, I swung my fighter around and locked onto Commander Harrison's ship. My plasma cannons charged, my targeting computer confirmed lock, and I opened fire on my own commanding officer. His fighter exploded in a burst of light and metal, the man who had trained me and trusted me and considered me his best pilot dying instantly because I decided his orders were wrong. Marcus, what the hell are you doing? Sarah's voice was sharp with shock and betrayal. I switched to open frequency, broadcasting to every ship in Task Force Hammer and the fleet beyond. This is Lieutenant Marcus Chen. I am declaring these civilians under my protection. Any Earth forces that attack refugee installations will be fired upon. This is not a military target, this is a massacre, and I will not be part of it. The response was swift and predictable. I was branded a traitor, a separatist sympathizer, a pilot who had suffered combat stress breakdown and turned against his own people. Every ship in the task force received orders to destroy my fighter on sight. Sarah, my wingman and closest friend in the unit, was the first to open fire on me. What followed was the strangest battle of my military career. I was one fighter against an entire task force, impossibly outnumbered and completely outgunned. But I knew their tactics, their procedures, their individual flying styles because I had trained with them for months. I used that knowledge to stay alive, dancing through their attack formations while broadcasting continuous warnings to the refugee camps below. The separatist forces on New Geneva, what few combat ships they had, scrambled to help me. Not because they trusted me, but because I was the only thing standing between their families and orbital bombardment. Together, we held off Earth's attack for 3 hours, long enough for the evacuation ships to launch and carry the refugees to safety in the outer systems. I didn't survive the battle. A missile from Sarah's fighter, perfectly aimed and professionally delivered, punched through my fighter's shields and tore my ship apart. As I ejected from the burning wreckage, I watched the refugee transports jump to hyperspace, hundreds of thousands of lives saved by my betrayal of everything I had once believed in. It was the first time in months that I felt clean. The separatists rescued me from the wreckage and took me to one of their hidden bases in the asteroid fields. Admiral Reese herself debriefed me, this woman I had tried to kill, listening to my story with the patience of someone who had heard similar tales before. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, her eyes studying my face like she was reading a map of my soul. "You know what you've done," she said finally. "You can never go home. Earth will consider you a traitor for the rest of your life. Your friends, your family, everyone you ever cared about will be told that you suffered a breakdown and turned against your own species." I nodded. I had known the cost when I made the choice. The refugees got away. That's what matters. Admiral Reese smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen from anyone in months. Yes, they did. And you know what the strangest part is? Earth's propaganda was right about one thing. You are a hero, Marcus Chen. You just had to become a traitor first to figure out what heroism actually means. I spent the next year working with the Colonial Liberation Front, using my knowledge of Earth military tactics to help protect refugee convoys and civilian evacuations. Not fighting, exactly, but helping people escape the war zone before they could become acceptable losses in someone else's strategic objectives. It wasn't glamorous work, and it certainly wasn't the kind of heroism that gets you on recruitment posters. The war ended 18 months later when Earth's government finally acknowledged that the cost of maintaining control over the outer colonies exceeded the benefits. The official peace treaty granted limited autonomy to colonial governments while maintaining Earth's oversight of interstellar trade and defense. Both sides claimed victory, both sides buried their casualties, and both sides began the slow process of forgetting the inconvenient truths about what they had done to win. I never returned to Earth. According to official records, Lieutenant Marcus Chen died in combat over New Geneva, shot down while heroically defending civilian evacuation efforts. The truth, as always, was classified above the level where it might cause embarrassment or difficult questions. They even named a training facility after me, the Marcus Chen Academy for Fighter Tactics, where young pilots learn how to follow orders and eliminate targets efficiently. Admiral Reese offered me a position in the new Colonial Defense Force, but I declined. I had done enough killing for one lifetime, enough following orders that turned human beings into acceptable losses. Instead, I became a teacher on one of the Outer Rim worlds, working with children whose families had survived the war. Teaching them about history and mathematics and literature, all the things that matter when you're not busy destroying them. Sometimes my students ask me about the war, about the heroes and villains they've heard about in stories and documentaries. I tell them the truth, as much of it as they can handle. That heroes and monsters aren't different people, they're different choices made by the same person. That the line between protecting people and destroying them is thinner than anyone wants to admit. That victory without conscience isn't victory at all, it's just successful brutality. The hardest part isn't living with what I did in service to Earth's cause. The hardest part is living with how long it took me to understand that following orders isn't the same as doing right. That being good at your job doesn't make you a good person. That sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is refuse to be a hero the way other people define it. I was 22 when I first killed another human being, and I thought I was saving the world. I was 24 when I realized I had been destroying it instead. Now I'm 35, and I understand that the difference between hero and monster isn't what you do, it's why you do it, and whether you're willing to stop when you realize you're wrong. The children I teach today will grow up in a galaxy where Earth and the colonies coexist in uneasy peace, where the wars of my generation are history lessons rather than daily reality. Some of them will become soldiers, some will become leaders, some will face the same impossible choices that defined my life. When they do, I hope they remember that true heroism isn't about following orders or achieving objectives or being remembered in history books. True heroism is about recognizing the monster you're becoming and choosing to be human instead, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted to be.